You're such a great guy, man, I tell you. And I'm just feeling thankful to know you and to know you and through Aaron. Aaron has come here and preached a couple of times, and I've come here to support her, and so to be invited to speak as well is just an honor. And this group, there's such a good vibe to this church. It's kind of a family, and I think I like it. I like it. If I lived closer, I would come here. So thank you for being you, for being a family, and for being welcoming, and for being full of love. I love you, and I love this place. Bruce wanted me to tell my story today, and wondered about sort of a passage that I would, or a theme that I would sort of focus on, and the idea is love, and that's why we went with 1 Corinthians 13, like known as the love chapter. And I think it's a great passage because it really does speak about, like, you can do a whole bunch of stuff, but if you don't love, then it's like a clanging gong or a cymbal or a clanging cymbal or whatever the terms are. What's a clanging cymbal? And a noisy gong or something like that. Anyway, so I am focusing on the idea of love. When I preach, or when I listen to a sermon, my question always is, every single sermon, so what? So what's the point? Like, what's the point of listening to this whole sermon? What does it have to do with my daily life? And so I'm going to give you the conclusion of my sermon now, so that if you want to zone out and forget everything I said, that's fine, and you can eat and whatever else you want to do. But here's the conclusion of my sermon. Love is the solution to everything. It's not rocket science. It doesn't require 10 years of university. It doesn't require a master's in theology. It is love. If we learn to love each other, love God and love our neighbor as ourselves, then that's the solution. I worked with folks who were homeless my whole career, and people regularly ask me, what's the solution to homelessness? And I could have said housing. That's obviously a big problem. I could have said better treatment centers, more treatment centers. Could have said all of that. But really, my answer was love. If we simply loved each other as ourselves, then we wouldn't be sort of using up all of our resources so that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, that the developers wouldn't go to bed with politicians so that you can build all kinds of condos that sit empty while there's people living in shelters. 8,000 shelter beds last night, all full of people without a home, and another 500 or so people living outside. And there's about 15,000 empty condos in this city. Solution to homelessness? Love. If we just didn't care about the bottom line being money. So yes, love is the solution to everything. Now you can forget everything I said after this. So I want to tell you my story a little bit, all again through the lens of love. I grew up in small town Newfoundland. I think Bruce's wife, yes, I forget your wife's name. She's from Newfoundland. She's a Newfoundlander. So at least one person here knows something about small town Newfoundland. Anybody else? Oh, here we go. Yes, here we go. Oh, all kinds of hands being raised. Yes, hallelujah. We have Newfoundlanders in the room. That's good. And so I grew up in that small town called Springdale, Newfoundland, in the Salvation Army. I was born into the Salvation Army. We were a family of 5. I was the youngest. I have 2 older sisters, and we lived in a 3-bedroom, small little bungalow, and we tried to make it work. We burned wood that we cut ourselves for heat. We ate our own meat that we killed. Moose. Every year we killed a moose. We rabbits, ate a lot of fish, shot a lot of birds, and we ate those. And we had a deep freeze, and that's how we lived. Lots of potatoes, lots of root vegetables, and that's how we got through life. And we were poor, but we didn't know we were poor. We were a family of 5 that really understood community. And in the Salvation Army, I grew up playing brass instruments, and I was a fairly good euphonium player. For those of you who might understand what a euphonium is, it's a bit of a small tuba, and I loved playing that instrument. And so my faith at the beginning of life was very much about love, about understanding, being in community, loving my instrument, loving playing the euphonium, loving playing the band. But it was also a bit of a faith of my walk with Jesus was a lot of running away, a fear of something as opposed to running towards someone. I was afraid of hell, which is why I was a Christian, as opposed to I was in love with Jesus, who was all about love. So that was where my faith started. But there was a muscle memory of love that was established inside of me all through my life, which I'm grateful for. That my foundation of love and Christianity is something that I'll never ever forget or regret. When I was 13, things changed for me. Things went sideways with my parents and my 2 older sisters. If you live in a small town anywhere, not just Newfoundland, you kind of have to chase work by moving to bigger cities. So my 2 sisters moved away fairly close to each other, and my parents divorced, and things went sideways. So I went from a person who understood community, understood living closely together, to a person who understood loneliness. And going through puberty, I was 13. Going through puberty is hellish at the best of times, but going through puberty with no one really to talk to or talk about, that stuff was even more distressing, and some of you would understand that. So I understood loneliness for a lot of my teenage years because my parents were trying to figure things out for themselves. My sisters were gone, and I was left to try and figure it out myself. So through my teenage years, I understood what it's like to be lonely. And again, I worked with people who are homeless, mostly men. I felt called by God to work with men who were homeless themselves. Somehow that was my calling. And so again, people would often ask me, is there anything that people have in common who are homeless? And again, I would say everybody that I know who's homeless understands loneliness in a deep and profound way. So in my teenage years, I think it was again the beginning of God's love for me, training me as to how to walk alongside men who were homeless, because I myself understood loneliness in a very deep and profound way. Because I was a euphonium player and I would go to music camp every single summer, a Salvation Army music camp, if you win the top student award, like what's called the honor student, and the honor student would get a free trip every single year to Toronto, to a place called Jackson's Point, which is a Salvation Army camp north of Toronto. And I flew to Toronto for the first time in my life, and I drove to Jackson's Point. I did the best music camp of my life. This whole thing changed my life. And at the end of that week, you go downtown to the Salvation Army used to own a building just in behind the Eden Center where the Indigo Books is now. We sold that to move uptown, which I'm bitter about. But back then we had this building and we had a big auditorium, and we did our final concert for music camp at that place. And during our rehearsal time on the Saturday, I found myself walking through the Eaton Center and walking up and down Yonge Street. And I remember to this day my heart pounding out of my chest with joy and excitement and just loving the life and the community and the things that surrounded me at Yonge and at Dundas. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. And then I walked further north up to College Street, and I turned right and stood in front of what I thought was the most sacred building I've ever seen in my life, the Maple Leaf Gardens. And I thought, I think I may have died and gone to heaven. And I knew right there and then that I was going to move to the city. I am not a small town boy. I do not pine to live back in Newfoundland. And I respect people that do. I love Toronto. Love Toronto. I do not like camping. In fact, anytime I get north of the 401, the air starts getting pretty thin for me. I'm always afraid I'm going to get eaten by a bear or something like that. I love the city. I love the inner city. I feel called by God to be in the city. I feel like God is here. Sometimes I feel dismayed that the only pictures of God showing up is in a river or a valley or a mountaintop, when I wish every now and then there were pictures of somebody standing on the top of a tower in the middle of the city praising God on the top of a tower, because God is also in the city and we can meet God here. We don't have to go to the country to find God. Now, again, I like going to the country once in a while, but I love the city. So I loved it here, and when I was 20, I finally moved here for good. I was studying chemistry in university. In my third year of University of Chemistry studies, I realized I sucked at chemistry, and I failed out of school, and I moved to Toronto, grew my hair long, pierced my ears. My hair all fell out, but except the stuff on my back. Sorry about that. That's still there. Just ask my wife. Sorry. Anyways, you can cut that out of the video if you want. I grew my hair long. I wanted to be a rock star, so I came and sang in a band. We played around, but I had to get a real job. For those of you who've tried to get in the music business, you don't get rich the way American Idol sort of tends to make you think. You gotta grind and play and be up till 2 o'clock in the morning and then get a job to pay the bills. Like if you go to a restaurant, your server could very well be one of the most talented people you've ever met. Actors, musicians, whatever, trying to make a living. And I was one of them. I had to get a job, and my job was as the cook, which, by the way, I shouldn't be cooking for anybody, but I was the cook in an old Salvation Army drop-in center at Yonge and Dundas called the Friendship Room. And I was cooking what I called Newfie specials, macaroni and cheese and bologna sandwiches every single day for 120 people coming in off the street. And it was there at age 20 that I learned, again, another thing about love. God was reaching out to me, and God said to me, I've never heard God's audible voice, but I felt very, very sure that God was saying to me, music is not which way you go. Here, in these streets, with these people, is where you will meet me and where I will walk alongside you most profoundly. And it was working with the men, again, most specifically single men who were homeless, that taught me so much about love, about grace, about forgiveness, about gratitude, about all the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, and peace, and patience, and kindness, and goodness, and gentleness, and faithfulness, and self-control. I learned a lot of that from people on the streets. And I chose this life. I thought I came here to bring Jesus to people who were homeless, that they were going to be the recipients of my awesomeness, and that they were going to get saved from hell. They were already living in hell on the streets, and they were teaching me how to be saved in different ways. I was learning about God in much more profound ways on the streets than I ever did in the churches that I grew up in. I thought I could bring Jesus with me to dark alleys, and when I got to those dark alleys, Jesus was already there, and I got to meet him in different ways. I thought I could bring healing to people who were sick and broken, but it was me. It was my healing that was coming quickly, and I'm grateful for that. So, I'm just going through my notes here. After that, I did a couple years as the cook. I went to Bible College. Tyndale was called Ontario Bible College. It's now called Tyndale. That's where I met Erin, the lovely Miss Erin. I heard her singing in a practice room. I fell in love with her voice. I saw her, and then I really fell in love with her. I thought, this woman can sing, and she's bloody beautiful. So I will see if I can move in there a little bit. And took me a while, but finally, I think I wore her down, and I said, and we got together, and that was really cool. And that was how long ago was that? We just had our 25th anniversary, which was right. Yeah. But there were three things after I graduated university. Bruce, how long do I go here? Am I good till time? Yeah, you can just hook me off. Give me another few more minutes. I'm getting there, I promise. Three things happened when I graduated from Tyndale, all at the same time. One is we were engaged to be married. The other is I got hired as the director of the friendship room, the same place I was the cook at 7 years before that. And I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. All happening at the same time, and all freaking me out like nobody's business. I didn't know what to do with any of that information. I sat with Erin. I said, hey, I've been diagnosed with this. You know how it's totally messing me up. We're still engaged. We're not married. You have a chance, because I'm going to probably end up in a wheelchair when I'm 50. I was fairly correct about that. So you have a chance to bail if you want to, and I won't hold it against you. And she said, no, I'm with you. I love you. I love you. And so just love. This whole thing is permeated by love. I love you. And I'm with you. And when we got married 25 years ago, we said to each other, in sickness and in health. And man, neither of us knew what we were actually saying, but boy, did we stick it out so far. So far, so good. So far, so good. Yeah. So I got the job. We got married. We did things. I was able to walk. I was still able to ride my bike, all that stuff. But I knew I had MS, and that was always a constant third party in our marriage, really. And yes, do I think being a Christian means everything is going to be peachy keen easy? Absolutely not. Do I struggle with depression? Yep. I take medication for it. If you take medication for depression, that's okay. We're humans. We have stuff going on in our lives. just because we love Jesus doesn't mean life is easy. It just means that we have Jesus to walk alongside us, that Jesus knows what it's like to be down in the pits with us. Good Friday is coming. We just heard about a woman who died today with a heart attack. Good Friday is coming. That's all of our fate. We are all going to die. But Easter is coming too, and we live for Easter. I know we're all heading to Good Friday, but that's not the end of the story. Because of love, Jesus overcomes death, the biggest enemy of all. I'm jumping all over the place, but that's okay, I guess. Yeah. So as I was running Friendship Room, we got approached by the city to run shelter beds. So we opened 60 shelter beds. I hired a bunch of people. God spoke to me all the way along saying, don't treat people like projects to fix. Treat people like people. If you treat people like animals, they will act like animals. If you treat people like people, they will act like people. It's not rocket science, but it's revolutionary. Love changes things. Treat people like people. We evolved. We got expropriated from that Young and Dundas. If you've ever been to Young and Dundas lately, there is no drop-in center there. There's no room for it at Toronto's version of Times Square. So we got the boot, and I was again mad at God for that. But God was way smarter than me, always has been, always will be. Thank God for that. And we moved from Friendship Room, which was a little drop-in center and winter shelter for 60 people, to another building at Jarvis and Richmond, which we called Gateway, which became 108 beds for men who are homeless. And we started running a full-time, all-year-round shelter. And we called ourselves the Gateway because we wanted to be a place where when people come through our doors, other doors would open to them. A door to recovery from addiction, or a door to friendship, or a door to God, whatever it is that people were looking for. We wanted to be that. I did that for about 15 years, run that place, tried my best. We did some social enterprise work. We opened a laundry business. We were farming out all of our sheets and towels and pillowcases, which was costing us $300,000 a year. And we had all these men who were able-bodied. I started to wonder, why don't we do our own laundry and teach guys here who are able to work? And so we opened a laundry business, and we went around to all the different Salvation Army shelters, and we do all the laundry. To this day, that laundry business is still open, and 10 men who were homeless and hard to employ are now working there. And am I proud of that? Absolutely. Is it okay to be proud? I think so. Jesus loves me, and I'm glad to be able to be a part of God's work. We did Gateway, then after that I left and became a mission strategist for all of the Salvation Army shelters, meaning I wanted to drive home to all of the shelters. If we don't focus on our mission statement, which is to share the love of Jesus Christ, to meet human needs and to be a transforming influence in the communities of our world, if we don't drive that home, then we are nothing. We have to be focused on our mission. And so that's what I did. Then I got finally sick enough to have to go to hospital. I was there for 3 months, 4 months. I ended up in the wheelchair finally. I couldn't walk anymore. I had to retire before I was 50, which I hate. Again, do I like any of this? I don't. Would I rather be running a shelter? 100%. Do I miss my work? Oh, do I ever miss my work? Do I now live in a nursing home? Somebody was talking about nursing homes. I do. I'm 53 years old, and I live in long-term care. Aaron and I no longer live in the same place. Is that hard? that me and my wife live in a different place and sleep in different beds? Man, is that hard. Is that ever hard? But is God in the middle of it? Do we live for Easter? Oh man, do we ever live for Easter? Do we ever look for that? Right now, I'm going to finish now, Bruce. I promised you I'm finishing. Right now, I'm qualified as a spiritual director. So right now, the thing that gives me some purpose is I walk alongside people, whoever chooses to come with and reach out to me. I walk alongside people who want to share with me their spiritual journey, and that gives me purpose. And I'm grateful that God, even in the midst of the pain, even in the midst of the struggle, is with me every single step of the way. And God is going to do the same thing with you. God loves you. And you know what? In order for us to love anybody, we have to believe that we are loved and lovable, that God loves us and we are the beloved, that we are children of God. If we get there, if we can finally get there, if we can believe that God is love, if we can really believe that God can solve homelessness, that God can cure cancer, that God can cure MS if God so chooses, if we actually are people that believe what we say we believe, the world changes. But in the meantime, one person at a time, if we just own the fact that we can love each other love our neighbor as ourselves, we can change the world. Thank you so much, folks.